It's that time of week again. Yes, that time of week. Wednesday. Grab your chicken tendies, send your dad to go get milk from which he'll never return, and get cozy, because today we're looking at the Existentialism iceberg. A little bit of a weird decision, but hey, I'm known for weird and wacky shit. So buckle your fuckles and get ready to just dive right on in. Level 1. The sky. I trust that you know how an iceberg chart works, and at this point if you don't, you're a little bit late to the trend, but that's okay, buddy. Thanks for watching. This level consists of things that everybody knows. God made everything. Now, of course, if you believe in any sort of religion, most of them have some form of celestial being and or immortal God marked as the creator of everything, which leads to the idea that God made everything. Because of the fact that we don't know where we came from, we have this question of what the fuck and why, and simply saying some big cloud dude with a beard did all of it is a lot easier than explaining everything in and of itself, or even posing the idea that it might be a mix of science and a god responsible. And thus God made everything is the mentality held by many people who simply don't want to think critically or believe anything else, not to sound like a Redditor or rag on religion, but the US South is really not an intelligent place for a reason. And a lot of that is because people would rather believe that God made everything, rather than believe that they can do anything. God doesn't exist. The literal inverse of the thing that I just explained, the idea that God doesn't exist is one based in the fact that some giant dude in the sky with a beard made of clouds made everything in 7 days, and then told humanity they could go suck his fucking cock because they ate an apple is understandably very far-fetched to some people. This idea has gained more popularity as the era of the time that you would get fucking murdered for not being religious has started to go away, and it holds a relative bit of merit because there are scientific explanations for many things the church said couldn't be scientifically explained, and the church also holds very old and unpopular conservative ideas to its heart. Big Bang Theory. Big Bang Theory, not the shitty American sitcom featuring Bazinga Man, is the theory that the universe was created in some form of explosion, and that every bit of matter we see now was at one point condensed into a super hot, super volatile thing barely the size of a pinhead. And there's actually solid evidence for this theory out there, which means that it is most likely how the universe as we know it was created. Bazinga. And that does it for level 1. Now we're on to level 2. I don't know what the fuck is up with the Rick and Morty things at the side of this, but I'm kind of not rocking with it. It's a little bit cringe. But that's alright. Buckle your fuckles, let's just dive right in. Religion complexity. Because of the weird way that this is spelt, I really don't know what this is talking about, whether or not religion is just kind of complex and weird, or it's referencing a series of 9 studies by Melissa J. Wild about social inclusion and religiousness, because of the fact that religion intersects everything, race, class, and even wealth, but it also creates barriers in all of that and does nothing but breed division amongst human beings. And that study proves this definitively, and even comments on it in a little bit in a book I'm thinking about buying, if only I wasn't poor. Infinite Universe. Not to be confused with Infinite Universes, Infinite Universe is the theory that the universe as we know it simply goes on forever. It's impossible to disprove because the universe is only 13.7 billion years old, which means that light can only travel 13.7 billion light years, which means that that distance is the furthest we can see around us. The Infinite Universe theory basically is the multiverse, but rather than hopping universes, you're just traveling extreme distances in the universe before everything inevitably repeats itself. Anything that can happen does happen, and because of the law of infinite probabilities, sometimes shit is just really, really wacky. Atheism. Atheism is the lack of belief in any specific god or any spiritual higher power at all. Atheism in recent decades has gained a lot of traction because you won't be fucking murdered in most first world nations if you don't believe in a god, unless you live in the American South, in which case you'd better start going to church because they'll kill your ass. And also, you can't prove that there is a god with empirical evidence, and there's been no empirical evidence as of yet to prove that God or some form of God exists in the world, just rather a lack of evidence for numerous scientific theories. And now we're on to level 3. Again, still not really rocking with the Rick and Morty shit, but hey, there's Jerry, I guess. This stuff is stuff that's a little bit more obscure. Some of this, some of you may not know about, but it's all still pretty cool to look at, so let's just dive right in. Simulation theory. Simulation theory is the theory that everything you know, the universe, and all of everything that ever has been and ever will be, is just a simulation inside of a computer. It is also the theory most commonly used by pretentious fuckheads and people simply too lazy to think critically about the real world. To think that a computer, a mere computer, could contain the vastity of the entire universe and all of its infinite complexities is a rather lazy idea that I strongly frown upon. Fight me. Fermi's Paradox. Now, the footage you see on screen is courtesy of SpaceX because I will gladly steal from Elon Musk, but Fermi's Paradox is that if life is possible, surely it must be abundant, surely there must be other civilizations, unless something wiped them out. These somethings are known as the Great Filters. The Great Filters are society-ending events or hurdles that no society can get past because of the fact that it's impossible. The fact that we are still here means that either we are the first and the only society and civilization to have ever withstood the Great Filters, or we've yet to pass it. Personally, I think we've yet to pass the Great Filter because such is the nature of every sentient creature to inevitably want to end itself and all of its brothers. Things with sentience normally don't end very well, and the Great Filters explain why there's a distinct lack of visible, or at least easily visible, alien life in the universe. If everything was killed off by some other type of thing, or nothing is able to surpass anything or leave their own star systems, then that means that all civilizations are destined to die alone on their own planets. A terrifying thought, but a logical explanation for why we've yet to find anything in space after 13.7 to 14.3 billion years. Last Thursday theory. The Last Thursday theory, also known as Last Thursdayism, is the idea that the universe as we know it, and everything that we've ever known, was actually created last Thursday, not 13.7 billion years ago. I doubt there's anyone out there who's actually pretentious enough to believe this shit, but it's a theory meant to test how you could definitively prove that everything existed besides memories that could have been very easily fabricated. Depersonalization. Depersonalization is the feeling that you are watching yourself live your life from an outside perspective and not really there. Normally, feeling depersonalization is a sign of a mental illness, but I guess it also applies to existentialism because it gives you severe existential dread. And now we're on to level 4. I trust that you still know how an iceberg chart works, and I trust that you also know that I'm not rocking with the Rick and Morty stickers on the side, so let's just dive right in like this is a porn star's asshole. Multiverse theory. The multiverse theory is a theory which posits that every time an observable decision is made, the universe fractures into a separate universe, so that way both decisions can be made simultaneously without violating the laws of physics. This would then create a multiverse, which contains the branches of all the different observable decisions that have ever been made. Proof for the multiverse is commonly held within the fact that a few years back, researchers put atoms, slowed them down greatly, and observed them meander through a track in which there was 2 possible routes they could go. And for just a split second, when the decision was made, you could see 2 separate atoms, which is supposedly evidence of the multiverse. Personally, I don't think it's that far from the realm of possibility that there's a multiverse out there. It's just a really trippy fucking concept. Quantum physics. Quantum physics is a study of the universe on the smallest observable and physically possible level. It's where the laws of regular physics start to break down, where things start to get really weird and wacky, and where nothing makes sense and just generally fucking confuses scientists. Which is, in my opinion, cool shit. Black holes create new universes. Now, black holes are a force of nature and a gravitational anomaly created when a supermassive star dies. It's simply so big that the fabric of space-time can't hold it, so it sinks inwards and starts sucking shit in for all eternity, until, a few trillion years from now when Hawking radiation gets to them, but that's a whole different thing. Now, because of the fact that black holes suck infinitely, and we can't find where this matter goes, no one knows where it goes, we don't know what's going on with that. But if we follow string theory, which is the idea that subatomic particles as we know it are not actually particles, rather the strings of the universe vibrating at different frequencies, and every force of nature is unified under one thing, which means that everything is everything and all is whole. That's string theory in 30 seconds for you. There is, of course, in the math for string theory, this thing called an S-brane. Now, an S-brane, from my understanding of it, is basically space with absolutely nothing in it. It's just empty space, and it would exist outside of our universe as we know it. Now, of course, in the math, a black hole can penetrate an S-brane because it is simply so fucking massive that our fabric of reality kind of bends inwards a little bit, and then suddenly, whoops, it's poking through the S-brane. And now we've got all the stuff in the S-brane that is just a pinpoint of incredibly dense, hot matter that sounds a lot like the Big Bang. So, that would be how a black hole creates new universes. Basically, we get a black hole sucking stuff down like it's being paid $25 a video for it, penetrating into a completely empty spot of space that we can't quite reach. This incredibly hot and dense matter, smaller than a pinhead, much like the Big Bang, suddenly it bursts outwards into an empty spot of space. Bam! We have a new universe. And while I say spot of space, I mean spot of space outside of our reach. We can't get to an S-brane without going through a black hole. Time. Time is operationally known as the way a clock functions, where it goes tick-tock, tick-tock, and suddenly the days pass faster and faster as your life slowly fills with more existential dread. But in science, time is a lot weirder. You see, we have a hard time understanding time. Unlike space, in which events can happen both forwards and backwards, humans are simply not capable of viewing time in the backwards perception. We can only view time in the forwards perception. Now, because of the fact that time is often considered within the fourth dimension and a fourth dimensional concept, we are only capable of witnessing one portion of it. But in theory, fourth dimensional beings could witness both portions of it, forward and back. Time also doesn't exist, but does. It really depends on which theory you follow. But if it's of any comfort, time wouldn't exist without you, and the universe would end almost instantly if all sentience stopped, because there is no way to divvy up the time and stop a billion years from being 1 millisecond. Without observers, everything comes to an end with no gauge and everything flies off of the handle. So we're kind of necessary for the universe's continued existence. Free will. Now, you have the ability to choose, to think, to speak, to eat, and this is all considered within free will. But there is, of course, doubts whether or not free will even exists, which is why it's on this iceberg. You see, what you like to eat and how you eat is actually determined by your gut microbiome. If the little bacteria in your gut don't like certain things, you don't eat certain shit. And that's how that works. Of course, what you say and what you do are relatively within your control, but some studies have shown that you already decide what you're going to do and what you're going to say before the conscious part of you decides. So the subconscious is what's really at hand here. Of course, this might be minorly terrifying, but look at it this way. You're simply too much of a literal fucking legend to make the wrong decision, so if free will does or doesn't exist, it doesn't matter, because you're simply too powerful. That's how I look at it. Of course, saying that there is no such thing as free will and that everything is predetermined is a very weak way of looking at the world and a very defeatist mentality, something that I loathe incredibly. So I think that free will does exist, it's just a little bit complex in how it functions and how it works. And now, we're on to level 5. We're about halfway through this video, so it's been a lot shorter than Icebergs I've done in weeks past, and I'd like to just take a moment to thank you for watching this far if you have. I greatly appreciate it, and I love the opportunity to make these silly little videos on the internet and bring a little bit of entertainment, distraction, and happiness to your day. Now buckle your fuckles, let's just dive right on in. Simulationception. Somehow we found the already lazy and arrogant idea that we're living in a simulation and found a way to make it even more fucking unbearable. The idea that we're living in a simulation inside of a simulation. It only holds merit because you can't disprove it, and it's only going to be brought up by the most fucking cringiest of utter dweebs who have zero social skills. 4D beings. Now, as we understand it, there is anywhere between 4 dimensions and 11, which means that there is a possibility that life and, yes, sentient beings can exist on all of these planes. Now, 4D beings would be able to go back and forth between time. The way that you and I can only observe time go forwards and never observe it go backwards, a 4D being would be able to observe time going backwards and forwards and maybe even left or right. I don't know. But a 4D being is something completely beyond our comprehension, and your brain just literally wouldn't be able to process it. You'd probably trip the fuck out. Quantum immortality. Quantum immortality is like an idea similar to Schrodinger's cat or Schrodinger's douchebag if you're cool. Quantum immortality is the idea that because you are an observer and thus a fundamental part of the universe, you simply can't die, you will instead simply switch consciousnesses, is that how you say that? Into a close alternate reality, so that way you can continue to observe. This is why some people have the wackiest, weirdest near-death experiences happen to them, and they're all fine and dandy and, just, they don't fucking die. Of course, the way to prove that quantum immortality exists would be to put yourself in a box with a button that has a 50% chance of blowing you up. Now you push this button. You survive one time. Okay, that's cool. You keep pushing the button, and because you keep pushing the button and you keep surviving, in theory, that would prove quantum immortality. However, because you'd have hopped alternate realities and alternate universes so many different times, there's some universes where you'd accidentally disprove the idea, even though you survive and continue to observe, because like I said before, observance is a crucial part of the universe, and without sentient observers, time flies by with nothing to anchor it. Hallucinogens. Hallucinogens are everyone's favorite kind of drugs, the ones that directly fuck with your head and make you see shit. Now, hallucinating is already kind of a terrifying experience, and if you haven't done that before, 0 out of 10 would not recommend, but some people are insane enough to willingly do that to themselves and ingest stuff like psilocybin, DMT, and a whole bunch of other shit ranging from fucking weeds that grow on the ground to goddamn cold medicine. Why? I don't know. These stupid fucking monkeys like to poison themselves. That's like 90% of humans' definition of fun is just poisoning yourself. But what you see on hallucinogens and the positive feelings felt on some hallucinogens is so awesome that people do it. Some people think that DMT allows you to see into the next realm or even the next dimension, and psilocybin is an incredible drug with massive potential to help stop depression, a growing pandemic as we see it. So overall, while I personally would not like to hallucinate, hallucinogens are pretty cool. Brain in a vat theory. The brain in a vat theory suggests that you are simply a brain in a vat or a jar, being fed the nutrients you need to survive, and that your entire physical experience and all of your memories are simply part of a computer simulation. This theory is part of Solipsism, which is the idea that you are the only sentient being to have ever existed. And for the most part, we all know that it's kind of bullshit, It only exists to, question how you see the world and why you see it as real. There are, of course, inevitably the 4chaners and turbo redditors who believe this shit for realsies, and that is arrogant. Some of you people talk about my ego, but goddamn, at least I don't believe I'm the only sentient motherfucker to have ever existed. Also, this image you see on screen here is a logo to a really cool YouTube channel about philosophy. If you're into that kind of stuff, you should go check it out. Now here we are at level 6, the bottom of the iceberg. A lot of this stuff is still things that people know about simply because this iceberg is full of very common knowledge, but hey, at the very least it's actually kind of fucking interesting, unlike some of the other icebergs that I have seen and even contemplated recording for this channel. So, buckle your fuckles, let's go even further. Nihilism. Nihilism is the idea that it's impossible to believe in anything, and that's just putting it in layman's terms. It's actually a family of philosophies and argues that basic truths can't be communicated because different people believe different things, that communication itself is impossible because you'll never be inside of someone else's head, and that objective facts are even hard to prove, if anything, believe in. Now, of course, nihilism has a really bad reputation because every edgy piece of shit teenager ever thinks, everything's so pointless, I'm a nihilist, when in fact what he's feeling is incredibly horny. These pieces of shit single-handedly ruined an entire philosophy for everyone. And if you unironically say you're a nihilist, 90% of the time you're cringe, and the other 10% of the time you will be considered cringe anyways. Sentient Universe. The Sentient Universe theory is a theory that argues the universe itself is sentient, and there's two different arguments for it. One could argue that every object in some shape or form has some sort of observance and some sort of passage in time, and thus it serves as a sentience that anchors time and place. Kinda. This one's really iffy, and I don't think stars are thinking very much. If that was the case, the sun would have fucking blown us sky high long ago. The other theory is that we are simply the universe experiencing itself. Some religions believe this, and a lot of people who have absolutely fucking fried their wires on hallucinogens and seen what is the closest iteration to God this sad universe has, also say this, which means that there might be just a little bit of merit behind it. Look at it this way. You were made from fucking stardust. Yes, that's right, stars exploding and splooging everywhere inevitably made you. And without sentience, there is nothing to anchor down time. With nothing to anchor down the passage of time, a trillion years becomes a millisecond becomes a trillion years, because there is no meaning to any of it without something there to stand still and observe. Thus, we must exist and we must be sentient for the universe to continue to exist itself. False vacuum theory. The false vacuum theory is the theory that the universe is actually in a state of false vacuum. This means that the universe is not at the lowest possible stable energy rate, which means that it could downshift. You probably have no idea what that means, so let me explain a little bit. Everything, as you know it, likes to be lazy. A lot. The universe likes to be in the lowest energy state possible, which means that if it can downshift in terms of energy, it absolutely will. Now, what would that mean if the universe downshifted in energy right now? Well, I'll tell you what that would mean. That would mean that everything would be destroyed, everything would be silenced all at once, and that the laws of physics as we know them would stop functioning. Now, this understandably sounds a little terrifying, but you're thinking, hey, if this shit works right now, why are we here? If we're in a false vacuum, why haven't we already been booted out of it? So let me explain that part too. With the false vacuum theory, if you're in a false vacuum and you're on an energy plateau, it would take a little bit of a nudge to force you down. So, to put it in layman's terms, you kick a ball down a hill. The ball rolls a while and it stops on a flat spot. The ball isn't at the bottom of the hill, you just have to kick it a little bit further and suddenly bingo bango bongo, ball at the bottom of the hill. That's how that shit works, right? Now, of course, there are several conspiracy theories about this, including one involving quantum immortality, which theorizes that the universe actually did end in 2012, but because of the fact that observers must continue to exist so the universe can continue to exist, most of us managed to survive by jumping to a different reality where shit's been weird. And honestly, if you think about it, everything that's happened in the last 2 years, that sounds about right, really. Solipsism. Solipsism is a family of philosophies similar to nihilism, but not quite the same. See, nihilism believes in nothing. Solipsism believes that you are the only sentient being to have ever existed. Now, not very many people actually believe this, and most of them who do are insanely mentally ill, making them only slightly worse than the people who unironically believe in nihilism. But the primary point of solipsism as an idea is simply to question why you think everything is real, and sort of test your resolve to see whether or not you could prove to yourself everything is real, or whether or not you need to do some rethinking of how you view the world and yourself. Level 7. We're completely off the iceberg now and into the dark void below. And it's interesting how close we are to the end of this video, you and I. A little piece of me from the past thrown to you in the future for you to enjoy. So sit back and enjoy the ride, because soon we won't be together anymore. Omnipotence Paradox. The Omnipotence Paradox is one of the leading arguments against the existence of an all-knowing and all-capable God. Basically, to be omnipotent means you can do all and means you can know all, and so on and so forth. Basically, you're a god. Wow. But if you wish to create a stone so heavy that you, an omnipotent god, cannot lift, you will inevitably be proven as not omnipotent. Simply because if you create the stone that you cannot lift, you are no longer capable of lifting the stone, which means that you are no longer omnipotent. You can't do all. But if you can't create a stone that you can't lift, you were never omnipotent to begin with, because you can't create something that's beyond your strength. The process of dying. The process of dying is, of course, an utterly terrifying one. One last great, final unknown. One that, though we have theories, though we have logic, though we have reasoning, we can never know for sure until we've crossed that final line, till we've entered a new book entirely, not just a new chapter. The process of dying can take months. The body prepares itself to go away, to shut down, to be gone forever. And with this, blood flow slows, energy drains, people sleep. They're pensive, they're calm, and they're reflective, until eventually one day, if it's natural, they just drift away, gone forever. In the minutes after the brain has died, of course, the brain still retains some functionality, the last circuits of electricity firing through your skull. Your sense of hearing is the last one to fade away forever, before everything goes blank, at least on this plane. There are some stories of things happening in the afterlife, or there being an afterlife to begin with, but you won't know until you're dead. Sonder. Sonder is the feeling and the realization that strangers, that everyone you meet, that everyone that ever has been and ever will be, has intensely complex and strangely meaningful lives in the same exact way that you do. I'm no stranger to this feeling. I feel it often, and I often wonder, what the hell is up with, the fact that I can look at someone and know absolutely nothing about them, and yet there's entire novels worth of things rattling around in their head. It's a strange idea to know that we're not alone in this world, and quite honestly, it'd be so much easier if we were, but that's not the way it is, and it's arguably much better that that isn't the way that it has been. Sorry about those last few entries. I don't know what came over me. I stopped being a funny sack of shit and actually thought deeply for once in my goddamn life. Now, here we are, at the end of it all, the very last level of the iceberg. Level 8, completely beyond any light, completely within the abyss, the strange things that nobody really knows anything about, and that even I am not going to be able to pull some bullshit rope out of my ass to explain. Consciousness. To be conscious is to be aware of yourself, be aware of others, be able to dream, to think and to ponder, and mostly to know that one day you're going to die. Consciousness is a terrible, terrible, and horrifying prospect that I wouldn't wish on any other species. Humans kind of make up for everything that they do wrong just by being conscious, just by being present to witness all the horror. And yet we find infinite joy and infinite delight by being there to witness all of the good, too. The concept of consciousness is a confusing one that's hard to explain and has perplexed scientists for years. The conscious mind doesn't need to exist for humanity to prosper, for humanity to keep going. So why is it here? That's a question no one can really answer, and that leads some people to believe that maybe God put us here, maybe some higher power. But of course it always leaves people with one burning question, one that I'll get into in just a moment. Mind of God. The Mind of God is a book written in 1992 that posits that science and religion are two sides of the same coin. Now this, in my personal opinion, isn't the worst take to have ever been imagined. In religion, there are many inexplicable things because religion just doesn't explain how the world fundamentally works on a logical and scientific level. And science is a fundamental part of the world, so it must be explained. Applying science to religion isn't inherently a bad thing, and applying religion to science, so long as you do not let it block the scientific method or cloud researching minds, also isn't entirely a bad thing. There's infinite possibilities out there, there's infinite reality, and there's near infinite things for humanity to study and learn. No way, no shape, and no form will we, whether we have 10,000 years left alive or 10 million, ever figure out everything that there is to know. And that's part of humanity's sort of curse, is to always hunt, to always chase, and never be satisfied fully. We may answer questions this generation about massive things, but those questions will just simply leave more questions. And that isn't entirely a bad thing. I myself am not an overtly religious person, and I hate people who use religion as an excuse to be hateful or just simply ignorant, but I don't think the idea of pairing God with science is the worst one we've ever had. Again, so long as you keep the American South from it, don't be a fucking bigoted idiot, and also don't let it cloud the scientific process. Remember that question I said every conscious being had? Well, here it is. Why? The one burning, unanswerable question every single sentient being has had and ever will have ultimately boils down to why. In some shape or form, we all want to know why, and ultimately, we'll never get to know why. The best answer that can ever be found for why is simply whatever you want it to be. And I think that's okay. I think it's better that we don't know why, that we don't know if there is a why, that why is whatever you make it out to be, and why is whatever you want, because the alternatives are all much more sad. Nothing is everything. If all is whole, if all is part of a greater one, and nothing is part of a greater all, then nothing is the greater all, and all is the greater nothing. Does that make absolutely no sense? Yes, it doesn't make any fucking sense, and it's not supposed to, simply because of the fact that you have to absolutely melt your brain to understand it. And while I get it pretty easily because I'm the one talking, I don't mean to sound egotistical, but a lot of people who haven't thought a lot about it, which most people don't, won't get it. Basically, if we are everything, if everything is everything, and nothing is part of everything, despite the fact that the two are absolute opposites, then nothing is part of everything. Even though nothing is the lack of anything, nothing is still categorized as thing, which means it is part of everything. But you know what isn't part of everything? The fact that I actually started being thoughtful instead of being the haha funny man that everyone wants. Just kidding, I actually like that. I really like this iceberg. So, nothing is everything. Well, that does it, doesn't it? We did it. We made it all the way through the existentialism iceberg. If you made it this far, I'd like to take some time to genuinely thank you. Thank you very much. It's because you watch this that my dreams get one step closer to being fulfilled, which is ultimately to do this whole silly video and writing thing on the internet full time, for realsies. So, now that you've made it to the end, if I could have just a second more of your time, please consider subscribing if you liked the video. It's completely free, it gets me even closer to my dreams, and you can always undo it if you hate my fucking guts later. I hope I didn't come off as too arrogant towards the end of this video. I stopped trying to be funny and instead started actually thinking about the topics at hand, which was a nice change of pace for the iceberg videos. I liked actually using my brain instead of the stupid monkey telling the jokes in my head. Anyways, go check out some of my other videos if you're gonna stick around for a little while. Thank you again. Thanks to my editor who puts all of these together. Have a wonderful time, and Memento Mori.